think it is love. I'm unafraid to tell people I love them now. I don't think I was 10 years ago or even maybe 5 years ago, but now I try to tell as many people as possible. My goal is that every day I tell one person I love them. That's a simple goal, right? I'm a pro-human person, and I think we need to protect, love, care for those people. So you can say care. When you greet someone at work, add an adjective when you see them. So instead of saying, "Hi, Johnny, how are you? Good, how are you?" I say, "Hi, Johnny, you look happy, sad, worried, tired, upset." And now we have a much more emotional conversation that opens up that sense of connection between us. So just think of using adjectives. It's really easy. Immersion is a 1-second frequency data stream that we can pull out of your brain and that identify how to create extraordinary experiences that influence people's behaviors. These signals coming out of your brain are really like a network effect. And guess what? A couple of those pass through your heart. So I'm using a standard called the PPG heart rate sensor. I don't care what heart rate, doesn't predict. We tested it, doesn't predict. But the immersion in the brain subtly changes the rhythms of the heart because, again, I'm sending information through the peripheral nervous system to affect people. So it took me 20 years to find a way to process them in real time. You have to resist those naysayers around you who tell you how dumb your ideas are. If they're dumb, you'll find out quick enough if you try to act on them. So I think just try stuff and play.
It's beautiful.
That's magic. Play is the magic.
Welcome to MAGICademy podcast. Today with us is Dr. Paul. He's the author of Immersion, and he's been leading measuring immersive experiences. It's so great to have you, Paul, with us today on the podcast.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm a professional nerd, so I am fascinated by these creatures called humans, and I run experiments and create technologies to help them live longer, happier, and healthier lives.
Beautiful. And why immersion?
Immersion, I'm using that in a technical sense with a capital I, which is a data stream that comes out of your brain that we discovered in work on funded by the U.S. taxpayers to identify how we can persuade people to take actions. And so, as you know, at least intuitively, the brain's a very lazy organ. We establish habits. Our brain like to do those habits, and it's difficult to influence people to change what they are prone to doing. And so in this work, we identified how the brain values social emotional experiences. And if that valuation is high enough, then I can influence you. Immersion is a 1-second frequency data stream that we can pull out of your brain and that identify how to create extraordinary experiences that influence people's behaviors.
How do you define immersion? Like, how do you define when someone is having a real immersive experience from the science and data perspective?
That's the key question, right? How the heck do you measure it? So great question. So we did just 20 years worth of experiments in which we gave people a message or an experience and then gave them the option to do something that we could observe afterwards or not. So for example, we did a lot of work early on with public service announcements. Initially, we actually measured neurochemicals in blood. So I take a blood sample from you. We will show you, say, a short video about kids with cancer, take another blood draw, and then you get a prompt on your computer screen that says, "Hey, you just earned $40 for watching this video. If you'd like to donate some money to St. Jude Children's Hospital, you can, but you don't have to." And we compared brain activity for responders versus non-responders. Once we found those neurochemicals, then we can optimize the collection of the electrical signals those neurochemicals induce in the level of the brain and throughout the nervous system. So we just looked at people who responded to messages and identified from about 140 different signals, the ones that really told us that these were valued enough that it prompted you to do something we could see. And then we combine these signals into these multiple signals into one overall measure I call immersion that is easy to understand. We've normalized this to run 0 to 100. So 100's higher, high, and 0 is low. And the most important thing is, since most people don't want me to go around poking their arms with needles all the time, we created a technology that allows us to pull these signals from smartwatches and fitness wearables. Because your brain's connected to a body, we traced out using pharmaceuticals the pathways from the brain to the peripheral nervous system. So we can see these data in real time, which is so cool.
Wow. And in your book, Immersion, you also mentioned about like the EGGs or fMRIs, and just like there's a lot of data in simple languages, what kind of data exactly are you looking at? Are you looking at like heart rate and body temperature? What else?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
what else?
we had to accurately and consistently predict behavior. We use multiple devices from fMRI to high density EEG to measuring the peripheral nervous system to capture these signals. And because this initial work was funded by the Department of Defense, the technology we developed had to be used anywhere. It couldn't just be confined to a laboratory. I don't think the Army wants to ship giant MRI scanners to Afghanistan to measure whether their communications are effective or not. So what we discovered is that if we pull data from the cranial nerves, so you have 12 cranial nerves are like the brain's output file, that these are nice networked level signals. So at the level of the brain, those neurons, those nerve cells in the brain are often multi-purpose. So they're doing multiple things. So they fail to consistently predict behavior. But these signals coming out of your brain are really like a network effect. And guess what? A couple of those pass through your heart. So I'm using a standard called the PPG heart rate sensor. I don't care what heart rate, doesn't predict. We tested it, doesn't predict. But the immersion in the brain subtly changes the rhythms of the heart because, again, I'm sending information through the peripheral nervous system to affect people. So it took me 20 years to find a way to process them in real time.
So it's like the subtle change of the heart rate somehow reflected the immersive
Even heart
experience.
rate's like second and third order, like acceleration, deceleration of the heart. So it's actually a lot more complicated than that. And it's driven by two main components. One is, if it's going to be a great experience, you've got to be present, right? If I'm distracted looking, I'm not going to have a great experience with you. And the second is that experience has to generate emotional resonance, has to make me actually feel something and make me care about what's going on. So if I'm attentive, I'm present, and I'm getting value from this emotionally. Emotions are how the brain tags experiences as important. Those two signals we combined into an overall measure. And the higher that is, the more metabolic investment your brain is putting into processing the experience you're having. So if I'm looking for some kind of prop, imagine when you lose your phone, you're like, oh my God, and you find that you're so happy, right? So that's your brain going, hey, this thing's important to you. You should hang on to this, right? Where if I lose, I don't know, some, plastic bottle, I don't care. It's fine.
That's very interesting. And you're also, in your book, you're talking about like when we are having this like immersive experiences, level of oxytocin and dopamine was actually being increased. Can you share with us a little bit, like, help us understand like why, how?
Yeah, so dopamine is this chemical that it does a bunch of things, but in the brain's prefrontal cortex, it focuses our attention. It says, hey, something's interesting happening in your environment, focus. It's the same chemical that drugs for ADD like Adderall and Ritalin increase. That's why it gives you more focus. Those drugs give you more focus. And then the emotional resonance of that experience, we trace back to the action of another neurochemical, oxytocin. And what's interesting is that those two neurochemicals interact with each other in really complicated ways. They sort of reinforce each other. One of the things they do together is not only do they tell you this experience is valuable and you invest a lot of processing power into understanding it, they create a craving to repeat that experience. So from a business perspective, if that business can create a peak immersion experience for a customer, not just the customer enjoy it, they have a great time, but it creates this craving to return and do that experience again. And that's really what you want when you live in the experience economy that we all live in, right? I don't want to go to dinner and maybe have really good food, but have a crappy server that just treats me badly. That's not great. Conversely, I can have a very plain dinner, but have a great server and it makes it great. So I'll give you a concrete example. I was in the Central Valley of California, a very rural area for a business trip. I'm driving back to the airport in San Francisco, and I stopped in the middle of nowhere at some diner with this lovely 50-year-old waitress who, was on her feet all day and she's smiling. She called me hun. And, the food was fine, but she was a sweetheart and I just loved her. And it just made my day that she truly seemed to care about me as a customer having a great time. And so now I'm going to tell you the name of the place. It's called Casa de Frutos. It's in the middle of the Central Valley. Anyone who's listening to this, who's traveling to the Central Valley, stop there. It's the person that did that. So here's a key takeaway for listeners. for any experience you're creating, when you add in a social component, the immersion is always higher, 100% of the time, right? So again, restaurant or retail or movie, right? If I'm going to see a movie and the ticket taker is like nasty to me, oh, I'm in a bad mood. And I'm like, oh, man, even if the movie's great. So again, I think it's that human component that is so important to creating these peak immersion experiences. We created a software platform 6 years ago so that anybody can measure what the brain loves in real time using any wearable. I don't care what wearable you have. We'll pull data from it, goes up in the cloud. We apply all these complicated algorithms, and then you can see second by second. So I'll give you another example. One of our subscribers to the platform is a very high-end restaurant chain. They want to grow as a restaurant chain, and they want to create extraordinary experiences for their customer. The food's already great. They took me to lunch there. It was $200 for two people for lunch. I mean, this is an expensive restaurant. What they're missing, though, is that extraordinary level of customer service. Some of it was good, but when I measured myself and a couple of people who went to lunch with me, what I found was after about half an hour, I wasn't having a great experience. Even though the food was great, they didn't send me off. I spent $200 for lunch. You should send me off with some extra love, I don't know, take a photo, ask me to come back. They're like, oh, here's your bill. Great, thanks. It was like, I didn't actually get this nice peak experience at the end when I really remember. People tend to remember the end of experiences a lot. So that's just a data solution, right? Which is you've got to train your wait staff so that not only are they great on the greeting, great on the serving, but before you leave, make it a great experience. You just spent $200. You should be really thanking that customer and say, we would love to see you come back. My name is Bob. It was a great time serving you. Hey, you guys must be celebrating something. Would you like a picture? Like that kind of social interaction where you go, just like my wonderful waitress at Casa de Frutos, right?
Curious, like how do we actually get people into the focused state? Because you're, as you're saying, in order to have this immersive experience, people really need to get focused into this experience. What makes or breaks that entry point for, the focus?
Yeah, such a great neuroscience question. Thank you again. So I live outside Los Angeles, and everybody's connected to the movie industry in 1 degree of separation. And so in Hollywood, they call this a hot open. So because your brain just wants to save energy and idle, if you can't get me going, if you can't open hot, whatever that is, whether it's entertainment, whether it's serving a customer, you've got to actually break out of that, get me focused on this thing. Hey, this is going to be awesome. We're going to have a great time. Hey, so back to the restaurant. I'm so happy you're here for lunch. My name is Bob. We're going to have a great time together. We have some wonderful food. The wine is excellent. I can make some suggestions, but why don't you look at the menu? I'll come back in a couple. Oh, you're like, oh, this guy loves working here, right? This is awesome. Got to open hot. Can't go, hi, how are you? Right. Then now I'm just like, oh, gosh, okay, well, So there's I think a sacred duty by businesses to create these peak immersion moments for customers, not only to increase what we call customer lifetime value, that return business from the customer, but we have shown in published scientific research that when people have enough of these peak immersion moments a day, actually 6 or more, you actually improve their mental health. You make them happier. Sustained happiness is higher when you have these peak immersion moments. Now, I may get that from talking to my kids, playing with my dog, watching a movie. But again, that in-person social experience is the most effective way to have a peak immersion moment.
Yeah, you're making them more present in the moment and connected, because as social beings, as humans, we love to connect. So being presently connecting with each other.
Perfectly said. I've got to break through and say, look, this is going to be a great experience. I care about you. I want to make this a wonderful experience for you, but I've got to convince you that it's valuable to you. So it's really about service, right? We're in the service world. All of organizations are in the service world, for-profit, nonprofit, government. They're all about improving your life at some level. So if I can open hot and convince you that this is going to be an amazing experience, I'm setting those expectations so that you really will enjoy whatever I'm doing. I had to renew my license recently. I'm like, it's going to be awful. They were so nice. I got in early. They had my name. I didn't have to wait. I was in and out in like 5 minutes. I was like, you guys are the best. What happened to hear? Now even the government's giving me a peak immersion experience. I thanked everyone. Like it couldn't have been nicer. Sometimes even the government can give you a peak immersion moment.
Yeah. And also I come into like DMVs with with an open heart and good vibes. So I would try to like cheer them up because I know, the work for them every day, it's kind of like can be very routine and lack of excitement. So when I'm there, I'm like, okay, maybe I can entertain them a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And we actually find that. We find people, I think, like you, who are very warm, who are agreeable. They actually tend to have higher immersion for every experience than people who are more tired or neurotic or unhappy. And so you're right. If you can put positive energy into an experience, you can actually elevate that experience, not only for the other person, but for yourself, because then you get this reflection. So let me give you
Exactly.
one more concrete example, if I may.
Yes.
We have
Yes.
some research that a high-end luxury brand in France, I'm not going to say the name because I might be not able to, but they actually measured the immersion of their salespeople using wearables, and they're able to predict which customers would buy from the immersion that the salesperson received, right? Because immersion is a shared social emotional experience. So if the salesperson's having a great time, almost always the customer's having a great time. Not only could they accurately predict who's going to buy, the more immersed the salesperson was linearly, the more the customer spent. And this is high-end luxury, like people are spending thousands of dollars. So it really means that it's a shared experience for humans. And I think that's an important point here. It's not about me trying to sell you more stuff you don't want. It's about me creating an experience that's emotionally valuable to you. And if you choose to buy more stuff, awesome. Even if you buy some little trinket, something for a couple dollars, it can still be a great experience, and I can still remember it. My lunch at Casa de Frutos, I don't know, was $15. Who knows what it was? It wasn't expensive, but it was memorable.
I love that. Process of selling is a process of persuasion. And it's basically kind of bringing people from point A to point B, or, helping people to make a decision, whether it's purchasing a physical item or purchasing a piece of information, which in the case, like a learning and development. When we're actually persuading people, or when people are being persuaded, what exactly is happening? What are those neurochemicals doing in terms of like the immersion for persuasion?
Right. They're really identifying that the opportunity that you have, the choice that you are going to make, will be sufficiently valuable that you should invest the time, money, resources, energy into doing that thing. So as you know, in my book, there's a whole chapter on the ethics of persuasion. So first of all, that's what social creatures like humans do. We're constantly persuading each other. So I've been married 29 years. I'm still trying to persuade my wife to be nice to me. I want to be nice to her. She may figure out I've been faking it this whole time and leave me. No, I'm kidding. But it would be stupid and wrong to all of a sudden become a jerk as a spouse. That would be bad. So we're constantly persuading. I'm persuading my kids. I'm trying to persuade my dog to be quiet while I'm here with you. So we're always persuading. So if we're going to do that, we should understand how to do this as well as possible. And to do that, that means, again, I've got to communicate in a way that conveys the options that you have. You can say no, there's no coercion, as effectively as possible. And you basically have 3 dimensions to do that. One is how I structure the information. I'll come back to that in a second. The second is how I convey the information. If I talk in a monotone, then this just tells you it's not important. The third is the delivery of the information, right? So let me go all through 3 quickly. What we have found, measuring over 50,000 brains now, is that if I structure the information as a story, I can sustain your immersion much better than if I just give you facts, right? You should buy this phone because it has a 14 gig hard drive. I don't know. Who knows? I'm making stuff up. As opposed
some people may really like it.
Very small stuff. Yeah, but most people say, look, this phone this is generation 15, and we at Apple have learned how to make this experience so wonderful that your life will be better. You can choose to engage in apps, or you can tell the phone not to bother you when you're being focused. Right? It'll do all these things. And so if I tell you a story, a human scale story, it's much easier for us to understand that. It generates more emotional content, which is the key to a persuasion, right? And then I, again, want to give you an option. I've got to deliver it well, and I have to chunk it in small pieces. So Accenture, the big professional services company, has used our software for 6 years to optimize the $1 billion they spend a year training their employees, upskilling their employees. And they have found that people cannot stay immersed for more than 20-minute segments without a change. So if I'm training somebody, if I'm educating somebody, I've got to think about those 20-minute chunks. I might talk for 15 or 20 minutes and then show you a film for 15 or 20, or have you work together with your colleagues at a table on something, right? So again, I've really got to think about shorter intensive learning is much more memorable and actionable than longer, 6 hours sitting on your butt. We're all overeducated. We've all learned to sit still for 6 hours. Doesn't mean that our brains
For a
work at
long
that
time.
speed. So it's really thinking of the short, intensive interactions as most impactful.
Yeah, and you're mentioning about like the 20, 20, 20, and 20 framework. It's like 20 minutes for kind of a warm opening or the intro, then 20 minutes for delivery, and then 20 minutes for like kind of brief break. I can't
Yeah.
remember.
Oh,
Am
yeah.
I right?
Any 3 20-minute segments, and then think about it a longer break. So Accenture has found this 5 or 10-minute break is not enough when I'm asking your brain to really have peak immersion moments, to really focus your processing power on this experience. So they've actually put longer breaks in because, again, they're trying to work at the speed of the brain, not at what I can force you to do. We're really trying to optimize that so that they can deliver effective training in as short a period as possible, but get the biggest return from the organizational perspective.
That's beautiful. And how do you measure the change? Like after we've put them through this full attention into the immersion stage and kind of carried them over or nudge them over from A to B and going through this persuasion and change. And then how do you actually measure the change?
Yeah, it depends on the outcome you're looking for. So a couple ways. In the training space, Accenture has found a strong positive correlation between immersion in training and information recall weeks later. For example, taking a test to see what you remember. We found the same thing in advertising, that people remember advertising when it has a peak immersion component to it. In the health realm, what we find is, as I mentioned earlier, when people have enough of these peak immersion moments per day, 6 or more per day, that they sustain high mood and high energy. So they're avoiding the opposite of that, which are depressive symptoms, where I have low mood, low energy, I don't want to do anything. And so we launched last July our first free digital health app so that anybody can measure if they're getting enough social emotional interactions to stay emotionally healthy. People can download it. It's the website's besttuesdayever.com.
BestTuesdayEver.com. Nice.
Yeah, version 1's for iPhone only. Version 2 will be out in September. If you're an Android person, just put your email in there and we'll let you know. And we made a decision to make this free. We think it's so important that people have a tool to measure whether they are thriving emotionally or not, and then have a goal. Just like you have goal for steps as a ring to close every day. I want to make sure I'm getting enough social emotional interaction to stay healthy. And the good news is your brain doesn't care so much how you get that interaction. So again, talking in person, seeing someone in person, going to happy hour, always good. But I can get it from a movie. I can get it from this podcast with you, right? My brain is certainly getting all that social emotional value all the time because we're social creatures and we seek it out. So watch a movie. As you know, in the book starts with me early on an airplane crying at a movie. And that's really interesting, right? Neurologically, it's not interesting if you're a human being, but as a scientist, I go, man, that's weird. If you know it's a movie, you haven't taken drugs, you don't have a brain injury, why are you crying? Nothing's bad's happening to you, but we get immersed in that movie. It's as if what's happening in the movie is happening to us. That's exactly what social creatures do. We connect in a real physiologic sense to each other, and we get the value of that connection. So I think when we have so many people now working at home and working on the road and digital nomads, we do have to make an effort to connect to others in person, at least some of the time, so that we get that real value. I don't know if you had this during COVID, Johnny, but I felt like my social skills declined because I was just living with my family. And after a year of not leaving the house, you didn't even want to see your family anymore. Like, oh man, I got to talk to other humans, So I do feel like, I haven't seen scientific research on this, but it seems like if you are not engaging socially, it becomes a little harder over time. So if you
Just like driving, because like after pandemic, people are crazy drivers.
Great example, yeah. So here's something I started doing about 10 years ago, which is saying hello to people in elevators. I think it's super weird that social humans pretend like the other people in the elevator are not there. You know you're there. Say hello. And what I discovered is that for half the people I say hello to, we have a nice 20-second conversation. The other half are kind of freaked out. That also makes me happy for some odd reason. So again, so it's practice. It's almost an experiment on myself.
Is fear an immersive experience too?
No, well, yes and no. So everything in biology is sort of inverted U curve. So fear manifests as a stress response. So actually moderate stress increases immersion. I have a reason. I have something to do. I got to talk to you. I'm a salesperson. I got to interact with you. That's a little bit metabolically stressful, but high levels of fear inhibit it. And also not having any motivation inhibits immersion. So if I'm in survival mode, holding on with my fingernails, I'm not going to think about connecting to you. I'm just trying to get through the next 5 minutes.
Probably disconnection. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I'm sitting on the couch playing video games, not talking to anybody, I'm absolutely disconnected and I'm not really engaged with life. So that's not good either. I mean, a little bit's okay, sure. But 8 hours a day by yourself is not good.
Yeah. And sometimes like, I don't know about the audience, probably some may resonate. Like sometimes when you watch a movie and you're like immersed into the storyline of the movie, the emotions and the motions of the characters.
Yeah, you kind of lose track of time when you're deeply immersed in something. And at the same time, you find it very enjoyable. You're like, man, I just sat in a 3-hour movie. How did that happen? Like, it just went away.
It happens to me a lot.
Well, yeah, so we do need those really peak immersion experiences, and we're not running out. They're not making fewer movies or TV shows or video games, right? That we really crave this, but I do think there's a call here for in-person interactions. Again, because the bandwidth hitting my brain if I'm seeing you in person versus seeing you online, like I am now, is just higher.
Yes, and I still remember when I was going to school and there was like an online version, but I always picked it in person because the vibes in reality, it's just so different. It's
if you remember from the book, we have a lot of subscribers to the Immersion Neuroscience platform who are in the education and training space, and they have shown that the same class online versus in person, the in person has much higher immersion. If you're just sitting shoulder to shoulder, first of all, it's hard to goof off. You can't just, goof around on the internet. And there's just kind of more shared energies. Immersion is contagious. So the person next to me immersed, I tend to get immersed too. This is the same reason why people laugh and cry more at a movie theater than they do watching at home. Yeah, I get this kind of contagion effect. We're weird creatures. We're super weird.
Yeah, like we mirror each other. And that brings to like a topic like trust or environment of safety. I feel like that's kind of the foundational piece for us to even start to pay attention or start to immerse. Based on your research, what are how do people feel, or how does the neurochemicals like respond when we feel, this environment is safe, like I feel there's a lot of trust, I trust this presenter, I trust the teacher, the instructor, I trust my classmates, I feel safe. Like what is going, like how?
Yeah. So you're exactly right. The precursor to trust, to having a great peak immersion experience is I've got to feel psychologically safe. I developed a physiologic measure of psychological safety. Am I comfortable around these other humans? If I'm not, I've got to work on the safety issue first, and then maybe I'll have a great experience, maybe I won't. And so particularly in this sort of experience organizational culture practice, if they're not safe, they're not going to be productive. They're not going to feel satisfied with their work. They're just going to feel stressed out. So the first thing is to create that psychologically safe environment. And the second is really to give them the opportunity to kind of flex their immersion muscles, if you will, give them the autonomy to really execute as they see fit. So what we find is low immersion in environments in which you're kind of being micromanaged. You're told what step to do and someone's watching you all the time. But if you say, look, you're trained, you know how to do this job, go for it, do it. And then you can modify it as you see fit. And you become much more immersed in that experience because high immersion feels valuable. Then you feel like, oh, I enjoy my job because I got to do this super cool thing that took some energy, but felt like it was really important. So again, from a leadership perspective, we want hard but achievable goals, right? So we like hard but achievable. That's one reason that people are more immersed often at work than they are in recreation. Recreation, we always have those hard but achievable goals, right? Maybe you're playing tennis or golf and you're trying to get better. But at work, you're like, holy crap, I got a deadline on Friday. I got to get this project done for my customer or whatever it is. And you're like, oh man, I made it. Friday, 5 o'clock, I did it. And you have that sense of your relief, like, oh, I really did it. And then you can tell your friends, like, oh, how's your week? God, I had the worst week, and then I did it. I pulled it out. I've never thought I could finish this hard project, and you feel so good.
That's great. And then let's dial back to the safety part. So based on your research, are there any key factors that help to contribute to the feeling of safety and trust?
Yeah, I think there's a now kind of older fashioned view that you're sort of taught in business schools from a leadership perspective that you shouldn't fraternize with people that report to you. They'll lose respect for you. That's all bogus, right? So we have a shortage of humans now, right? We have record low unemployment. The birth rates are in the toilet. We're shrinking. Every continent is shrinking except Africa, and they'll start to shrink maybe 2040. So we're going to start running out of humans. So if you have a job, you have a lot of power. And so one of the real takeaways is that from a leadership perspective, you need to actually build caring relationships with the people who report to you, because you work harder for someone you care about, someone you like. And I think that's a real change from the old-fashioned, hierarchical structure. It's much more horizontal. Most workplaces are much more horizontal. We want to give people autonomy, create an open environment, and create opportunities to get to know each other. So as you know, Chani, many workplaces now have open workspaces with Wi-Fi, have cafes, have a ping pong table. And that's not about recreation. It's really about social connection. I want to get to know the people I work with. So anytime you put people together, you're going to have a little bit of friction. But if I get to know you because we go to happy hour or we play ping pong or whatever, or we hang out on the couch for 10 minutes having coffee, then next time I have to talk to you, I've got less friction. So I think of trust as like a lubricant, a social lubricant. If I know you, if I trust you, fine. I don't have to bug you to get something done. You're reliable. You'll do what you're supposed to do, and you'll help me when I need help.
That's beautiful. I would actually bring our conversation a little bit into kind of the future, the bigger picture. So as we move into the future of super hyper technology development, like artificial intelligence, virtual realities, Web3 or Neuralinks, you name it, what would the best future look like through your lens of the immersion?
For me, I am super passionate about improving emotional health. So we have just a explosion of mental health disorders. And by having a free tool that lets you measure your unconscious emotional responses and guide you using AI to engage in activities that build up your emotional health, I think we can, for the first time, get ahead of the curve for mental health disorders, help people avoid things like depression, suicide. Our app lets you form social groups. We socially, emotionally regulate, right? If I get a notice that one of my friends is not doing so well neurologically, I can send him or her a message or a heart or a thumbs up or whatever that is. So I just think, what has been missing from psychology and psychiatry is true bioassays. Like, how do we measure your underlying emotional states? Well, we have that now. And as a company, we've decided to make this free. And I think it's super important. So what I'm passionate about is getting this into healthcare systems, corporate wellness programs. As we continue to grow in those areas, not only do we create better customer experiences and better movies and better education and training, but we actually improve the mental health of everybody in society, because you can even use a cheap, $30 wearable and get this data. So anyway, I'm very passionate about that. I think we can really now help people live happier, healthier, and longer lives. And as you know, people who are socially connected, they're healthier and they're happier and they live longer. So it's really about social connection. And that's what most of my professional work has focused on.
I would really wanted to step into that future with our audience, in a world where our bio assets are being taken good care of. People don't wait until we're sick to seek care. We proactively manage our energies, our emotional state, mental state, and our social lives. And there are devices and data to help us stay informed and help us to kind of nudge us whenever we need.
Here's my data right now. Look at that big smile. Oh, it's going now. So Well, and I was going negative because I had a big peak immersion moment. So after peak immersion moment, you always have a trough, but that's my live data. So that frown means I'm a little below baseline now, but my background is my psychological safety. I'm totally comfortable talking to you, getting a lot of value from this. So thank you for the gift of a peak immersion experience that you just gave to me. So it's really wonderful that you did that.
I think maybe there's a collaboration to measure immersion for the podcast or in the future for
It's free.
our audiences.
You can do it.
Free, yeah. And so let me give a recap for our audiences. So far we've talked about the story of Paul, the underlying motivation of why he decided to stay focused on the immersive experiences, and we also explored what does the neurochemicals are really doing when we're being focused, when we are actually doing persuasion, and when we are feeling trust and feel safety, and how important the role of social connections really are, and how we can actually measure everything in just one simple device through a physiological data that's easily accessible. Thank you very much, Paul. And let's kind of talk about your magic a little bit. When you were around 11 or 16, whichever age group you wanted to remember, what did you enjoy creating and playing so much that time disappeared for you?
I really like physical devices. So I like building things. My father's an engineer. I was the only son. And so I would escape all my sisters and my mother. I go to my dad in the garage and build computers and build car engines. And so I'm very mechanically oriented. And one of the sort of secrets of the success in my lab is that we built a lot of devices. They didn't exist, so we just built stuff. So I think there's a real play and curiosity that seems like magic, but it's basically a lot of that is just play. Just try things. Hey, if you break something, well, you can fix it, right? So no big deal.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like when we are actually in that childlike wonder state as adults, what would the neurochemicals be doing? Like, can we actually measure?
We had a multi-year research program on awe. Like what happens when you're like this? It's very hard to induce that sense of awe consistently. So I don't have a good answer for you, nor am I convinced by anything I've seen published. But I do think it's a whole brain effect. It's not one area, one neurochemical. It's almost a letting go of just allowing something to happen. You know, if you ever written something and then you go back and read it and go, man, this was good. Who created this? Like, I don't even remember doing that. It's that kind of whole brain where you're just almost checked out. And it's as if your brain's working without you being consciously aware. So I don't have a good sense of what that is, but I think it's a deep unconscious desire to create. And I think we all have that to a greater or lesser degree. And so this is why we get great thoughts in the shower or whatever, or taking a walk.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's like you're just letting go. And then all of a sudden you go, here's a solution to this thing that's been bugging me for a week. And so I think if we create those environments for ourselves, we can just play and not have goals. Solutions come to us. Or even dreaming, right? You ever dreamed a solution? It's wonderful. When you wake up, you go, oh my God, my brain just solved this problem.
Yeah, I feel like it's a rhythm. You have to work like really hard. We're using a lot of disciplinary energies, and then you let go, and then you work really hard, and then you let go. Maybe that's my hypothesis.
I love it. No, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah. What role does childlike wonder play in your personal life?
You know, I think one of the successes I've had as a scientist is the childlike inability to be wrong. I love to be wrong. Being wrong means I've learned something, and I don't mind if people think I'm dumb or naive. I'd love to be in situations where I know nothing, and I can hang around people who are more informed than I am. And so I think making mistakes is a big plus in most of life. And yet I think as adults, we're told, well, we have to live in a no mistake world. And no, just experiment, try stuff. And so I think that's really been a secret to my success is I'm willing to do not unsafe things, but, weird things that people haven't thought about and connect weird dots and just see what happens. And a lot of times it fails, by the way. A lot of, I'm talking to you as if I knew what I was doing for the last, 25 years. No, I've made a ton of mistakes. We could do 3 hours on the mistakes I've made. But, it's those mistakes that guide you towards a solution.
Yeah, and sometimes people kind of disassociate with like the curiosity, the ability to make mistakes with like reaching the outcome and predictability and consistency. And you're able to actually weave that gracefully, like the wonder, the open-mindedness,
I suppose it looks graceful. And no, I think going forward, it looks stupid. When I started doing the oxytocin work, one of my colleagues who's a medical doctor said that was the dumbest idea I ever heard of, that oxytocin would affect any behavior. Why would you think that? It's just for women giving birth. And it's like, yeah, but the brain's making oxytocin. It's got to be doing something in the brain. Nah, it's irrelevant. It's just for women. And so to me, that's just small-minded, right? Now, maybe he didn't read all the literature I read and all that, but I think, you have to resist those naysayers around you who tell you how dumb your ideas are. If they're dumb, you'll find out quick enough if you try to act on them. So I think just try stuff and play.
That's beautiful.
That's the magic. Play
is the magic. That's how we're actually expedite to our last question. And before that, are there any particular challenges aside from like mistakes? Are there major?
Sure. In the startup world, money, time, team. I think the solution I've found around those challenges, both in my academic lab and my company, is to build really good teams. And I think I've been either lucky or good at doing that, and have people who I've had the privilege to work with for, 15 or 20 years who are just brilliant and innovative. But honestly, so many people have and still support all the work I do, and not to mention my family and all that. So have a great support system around you and you'll be much more successful. But I want to make them successful, right? I want them, they have shares in the company, they have publications in my lab. I think it's really shared success is the key.
And it's also a social immersive experience with your team as well.
For sure.
I love that.
Yeah. It's love. Let's to put a point on it. You have to listen to this chemical of love. So, I'm old enough that I tell the people that work with me, I love them all the time. Then from the friendship perspective, they know what it means. It's not weird. And so, you got to love the people around you. If you don't love the people around you, maybe you shouldn't be around them.
Yeah, I say that to people as well. Beautiful. What do you think is your magic then?
Maybe I think it is love. I'm unafraid to tell people I love them now. I don't think I was 10 years ago or even maybe 5 years ago, but now I try to tell as many people as possible. My goal is that every day I tell one person I love them. That's a simple goal, right? And better if it's in your family, it kind of doesn't count. But even that, I think it's important.
It's important. And how do you, it's kind of like a big topic, but how's in the workplace, do you define love in the work setting?
In the philia sense, right? In the sense that I really, you could say care if love's too weird, but I really care about you as a human being. So I have many people that have worked for me that have said, at some point, hey, I'd like to go work for Google or Facebook, whatever. I'm like, awesome. I know people there. Like, I'm invested in you as a human being, as a friend. I don't care if you work for me or not. And by the way, then I got a guy working at Google I can call up if I want to do a project with Google. So it also helps me too. But, I want to be invested in people, number one. So I'm a pro-human person, and I think we need to protect, love, care for those people. So you could say care. By the way, here's a trick for listeners. When you greet someone at work, add an adjective when you see them. So instead of saying, hi, Johnny, how are you? Good, how are you? I say, hi, Johnny, you look happy, sad, worried, tired, upset. And now we have a much more emotional conversation that opens up that sense of connection between us. So just think of using adjectives. It's really easy.
Love that. It's just so simple to do, yet so impactful. That's beautiful. Thank you, Paul, for sharing your wisdom, your research, your stories with us today. And for anybody who wants to connect with Paul and build future collaborative projects together or just experience collaborative immersion together, his information is in the show note below. So we strongly encourage you to get connected and create new stories of immersion, of love, of deep caring, what it means to be human after all. Thank you, Paul.